Good morning, everyone. I'm Greg Hess, coming to you from IU 13. Welcome to the Data Quality Network meeting for September 18th, 2019. We have several topics today, so we'll do a few housekeeping things to start with, and then we'll get moving with the rest of the presentations. As you can see on the screen, our website, dataqualitynetwork.net, is where you can get the agenda and you can download materials for today. And you can ask questions via a link that's going to be on the agenda, or it's right here at the tinyurl.com, DQN September 19Q. Please use that to enter questions. You can do that anytime. And I clicked through the website. Hold on a moment. I'm supposed to do that. All right. So a quick recap of last month. We had the PIMS manual calendar collection 1 updates. Talked about data quality collections for PA Security, student, staff, grad, cohort collections, getting ready for October 1, addressing PIMS manual changes, and building a start of year checklist. Today, we'll have child accounting and start of year presentation. We'll talk about Act 16. We'll have a presentation from the PIMS Help Desk on the updates and pain points for the October collections. And then we'll have a review and some corrections for the getting ready for the October 1 and PIMS manual changes. We are collecting feedback for the 1920 school year. Please provide input and ideas to your IU point of contact. And again, you can access the materials here. So without any further ado, I will hand this over to Capital Area IU and the presentation from Steve Epstein.
All right, good morning, everyone. Today we have Steve from Central Dauphin here, so he's going to kick off our meeting this morning, so we'll hand it over to Steve to get started.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Epstein. I am from the Central Dauphin School District. This is my 7th year as a PIMS administrator. I'm actually pretty excited to present today because normally when I do my stand-up, I only get 4 minutes, but now I've got a half hour. So, oh wait, we're just talking about PIMS. So I've talked to Lori Sieber about child accounting, and when we have presentations from PDE, we normally just go over where things go on school calendar fact in the fields. We talk about the PIMS reports, but nobody's ever really explained to people, how do you keep track of the numbers, the 180 days, the hours, the waivers, and all that stuff. So I ran this by Lori, and she thought it was a good idea to present to people. Please take this what you want. If you need any further information after this, I'll be more than happy to share. But so what I do is when I start collecting data for the school year, and I meet with central administration staff, and we go over a calendar. So what we first need to understand, as most of you probably know, is where to begin, the BECS. In the BECS, I have a link on the PDF of where to look at instructional time and Act 80 exceptions for that information of hours, how do you use Act 80, and so forth. Number 2, bell schedules. This is where you determine the hours a school has with instructional time. You know, if there's a single building, how many minutes and hours throughout the week and the year. Use the smallest amount if targeted, if you have multiple building or a single building with different numbers out of multiples. Graduating class, your 12th graders. There's a link on there for the graduation seniors. That's not 100% going towards child accounting, but it's still there for you because it is information you need to know. So scroll down. It's just going to let me scroll down. Sorry.
There you go.
Okay, thanks. Developing a spreadsheet, that's how I keep track of it. Again, everybody knows minimum days is 180, minimum hours for each grade level. And again, I meet with directors, superintendent, and as they go over calendars, I keep a spreadsheet and track, oh, we need to do this here, we need to do that there. Act 80 days, these are like teacher in-service days, board approved. With a plan, these are not student days. They count as days, not hours. So number 7, things to remember when tracking data on a spreadsheet. Full Act 80 days counts as days, but not hours. And this here, it says top part of the chart. I'll show you later on what I'm talking about for the chart, and then -1. Partial Act 80 days, all you do is do the minutes from a full day. Again, I'll explain down on a chart that I show you later on. Approved waivers, the day counts, not the hours. And again, you have to apply for a waiver through school services when you have a particular building or a couple buildings in your district. But if it's the whole district that loses a day for, like, say, weather, you cannot apply for a waiver. So like if a school loses water and they can't go to school because there's no bathrooms, this is where you would submit a waiver to PDE. And again, how do you keep track of it? I'll show you down below. If you have a board-approved full day of school, but students leave early, for example, the last day of school for Central Dauphin is a board-approved full day, but we only have a half day. So we do minutes lost for that. And again, I'll show you on the chart below of how you keep track of it. District closures for weather, how you keep track of these days, snow makeup days. It's a wash. You lose a day, but you make up a day. But if you actually don't make up a day, you put a -1. And again, I'll explain where those numbers come in below. Early dismissals, late arrivals due to weather, that doesn't count. Now, I still keep track of it, but that doesn't count against any hours. So I keep a spreadsheet, and I'm going to go through each section of my spreadsheet. The spreadsheet's not in sections, it's on one spreadsheet, but I broke this down just to help you understand what we do. So the start of the total number of school days, including Act 80 days on your board-approved calendar, goes on a top line. So these are my calendars. Actually, my elementary are these two areas right here. My middle school's here, and then my high schools have multiple calendars. These are separate because my 1st through 3rd have different minutes as my 4th through 5th. So that's why I have it sectioned. But all of my days, I know this is really small to see, but this is 184 and this is 185 going the rest of the way. If you got this off of the DQN website, you'd probably see a little bit better than what this is. So then my Act 80 days. So this is a teacher in service. Here's a date of that in service. Here's a date of that, can't get it, of that in service right here. And then -1s because every single calendar has an Act 80 day for that particular day. And you can see that for the next 4. This one right here is a kindergarten conference. So only kindergarten has Act 80 days. And then here's elementary. So kindergarten 1st through 5th have Act 80 days. Here's a middle school conference, Act 80 day. So all of these are Act 80 days that have -1s. Now right here are my graduates. You can't count their days after their graduation date. So I put -1s. So right here, the total instructional days, so butts in seats, my kindergarten AM has 174 school days. And going across, my seniors right here have 178, 177 seated days. So then if you utilize Act 80 days as like half days, whether it's early dismissals, late arrivals, you can keep track of it here. But again, I don't know that I would use this for -1s. I'd still keep it as 0s because all you're doing is subtracting the minutes. So here is from Bell schedules. enter the minutes right here, minutes per day. Again, it's hard to see up on this. Hours per day, total minutes in a year, total hours in a year. So I calculate all this. So my kindergarten AM has, I think that's what, 479.5 hours. So 480 hours right here for this. This is actually last school year's data because it's complete. I wanted to show you a completed calendar. So waivers. So the last day of school, and scheduled half days, sorry. For waivers, scheduled half days and partial act 80 days. So my last day of school, here's a total number of minutes right here, 165. This is where I take into account the lost minutes and then I subtract it. So when I submit my school calendar fact, these are the hours that I enter for my calendars right here, okay? And then here's your late arrivals. And again, you would take your minutes right here, and if you have it, which I don't, those minutes here would subtract from the total, and it would be here. And then this is just PDE's requirements for each grade level. So now we took those Act 80 days out. We need to put those Act 80 days in to see if we meet the 180 hours. So all of those minus ones right here go back to ones here. So I'm going to go back up real quick. So this 174 days, adding those ones back in is 184 days. So now I met my minimum of 180-day requirements. So that's how I keep track of it. And then down below, at the bottom of my spreadsheet, I just keep track of the days I made up and use the snow days right here, okay? So here is on the side of my spreadsheet, to verify the calendars all meet the same numbers. August, we had 5 school days, no Act 80 days. And we go through each month, and it's just verification that we counted properly. We know how to add 1 plus 1. It's essentially what this is. So here's a waiver example. So this school year, one of my schools is having construction from last school year into this school year, and they did not start the first day of school. Now, to get something back from school services is like pulling teeth. So I put a waiver in June, and I still haven't gotten it back, but most likely we'll get approved for it. So this right here, I just document, here's the zeros for my waiver for my one school, and down here, construction of West Hanover. Here's the minutes that we're going to lose. Here's my last half day of school. And then here are my minutes. And we still meet the minimums for hours right here. So I think that's 465 if I read that properly. It's hard to see it here. And then again, my Act 80 days, we're still fine with days. We're fine with hours. So this school year will be fine. Now last school year, this is last school year's completed snow days, waiver days, and I color code things even though I'm colorblind. So the first few days of school we had mold at one of my high schools. So I had to put zeros in there because they did not go to school, and I color it yellow just because that tells me I have to, going down below fast, heat and mold. So right here, I have those minutes lost. We also had schools closed because of heat. There was no air conditioning. So these days right here are going to be waiver days. These days are Act 80 days going across. These are early dismissals, so no PM kindergarten. 2-hour delays, even though we don't do anything with them, I just document them right here. And then here's conferences, here's snow days, here's when we made up, here's when we didn't make up. And then in total, here it all calculates properly. We have 173 seated days. Here's our minutes lost. Here's our half day. And we had a school that had a water main break. So here's another waiver for this school. And here's our total number of minutes or hours. We still meet it, still meet the days. I'm good to go. But I noted right here, we're really close with PM kindergarten. So I just wanted to note it here in case we did lose another day of school. I wanted to at least keep it in my mind that here it is. And then here's our snow days down here. So we actually had 5 snow days and only made up 3. So now from this chart, what do we do? So field 1 from this chart I don't keep the AUN on the spreadsheet, so you can if you want to. So field 2, the school year, again, I don't keep it on there, but you can if you want to. Calendar ID, I'm not going to go through each one, but you can see that I don't have that on my spreadsheet. Field 8, field 9. I don't have anything from the school calendar fact until graduation ceremony date, field 13. It's on the top of my spreadsheet. The number of scheduled school days, top of my spreadsheet. Instructional minutes lost, here, or in a standard day, excuse me, instructional minutes in a standard day, it's right there. It's on my spreadsheet. Nothing due to loss to strike. Hopefully we don't have a strike, knock on wood. Act 80 days on my spreadsheet. Here are all my loss due to other reasons, field 18. That's all of this information here from my spreadsheet. Total makeup days, you know, it's based on the chart above. Field 20, minutes lost right here. And Act 80 group, it's not on my spreadsheet. So that's the gist of how I keep track of it. And it may seem complicated on this. I have shared a blank spreadsheet with people. I've had people call me and ask me to help them with their calculations, and I give them a blank spreadsheet. We go through it. You have to tweak it to your district, but this works. So that's pretty much it that I have. I don't know if I lasted a half hour.
Well, you're good.
Okay.
All right, then. We will pause for a couple minutes, allow people to submit questions, and then we'll move into the Q&A session. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with the Q&A session, so we can hand it over to Steve to get going.
All right, real quick before the questions though, someone pointed out, and I created this PowerPoint the end of last school year, and the BECs are updated. So these links actually don't work anymore. It's still the same, you know, BEC title, but the links are different. I can get the links and resend it to the point of contact here. And I can also, I think there was a question about posting the blank spreadsheet, and I can also send that to the point of contact here, and then it can post it however you need to post it. So the second question here, why do you take out the Act 80 days only to put them back in? So let me go to my spreadsheet PDF. Hold on. So right here, the Act 80 days, this top part of the spreadsheet is to get the hours. I know this is seated days, but we need to take out the hours for these Act 80 days. So when we calculate it, these hours, well actually right here, which is that, but these hours here, I need to remove the Act 80 days to get the hours. And then they count as days, I have to put them back in to count them as days, if that makes sense. I don't know if they respond afterwards, but that's why, because you can't count them as hours, you count them as days, okay? How do you document your Act 80 day activities? Whoever here, if you're referring to like the stuff that you send to PDE, I don't know who asked the question, my curriculum department, so my department submits into the Act 80 website to submit our group IDs and all that stuff. And then we contact the curriculum department and they give us a little synopsis of what each date entailed. And then we submit that with all that information. So that's how we document our Act 80 days. So it's on the curriculum department. So.
All right, great. I believe that wraps up this Q&A session. So what we'll do now is we will pause and then we will hand it over to Barry to move into the next presentation. So thank you.
Okay, good morning. I'm Barry Frank, Special Ed Data Manager, DQN Point of Contact, and more at Bucks County IU. Today, I will be presenting on the upcoming Act 16 collection. Some of you may have attended a similar presentation that I've made at the Data Summit the last couple of years. This is a different presentation. This is going to be more focused on the actual submission of the data and not so much the history of the reason that we have to submit it, the application, and the use of the data. However, for those that may be new, I do want to provide a short background as to why we have to submit it. There's two important pieces of legislation primarily related to this collection. Act 16 is Act 16 of 2000, which amended the public school code to require an annual report of per pupil expenditures for special education. Act 86 of 2016 further amended the school code to require that this report include the students whose costs were under $25,000, which previously were not included in the original Act 16. Act 86 also provided for an annual adjustment to the cost category ranges by the Consumer Price Index. I've included a few resources in links here, and this presentation is available on the site. So while you can't necessarily see here that they're links, they are links in the PDF, or not the PDF, the PowerPoint if you choose to download it. The first link is to the Department of Education site related to Act 16, which is where you can find some specific guidance from PDE. You can find the information that was submitted on the legislative summaries to the General Assembly, and some other guidance documents. I've also included 3 documents from school finances, which kind of discuss some things related to the reporting of costs for special education. These aren't related exactly to Act 16, but they do provide some helpful information that I think your business offices should be familiar with. I may touch on them a little bit later in the presentation, but I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. So what is reported for Act 16? Act 16 is a full year submission. It is similar to what you report in July, but it is for all school-age children. It's any student that was educated for special education between July 1st and June 30th of the year for the information's collection. It includes all students with special ed needs. Every student needs to be included, including those in Category 1. And again, they previously were not included in the submission. Students must have been special ed eligible at some point between 7/1/18 and 6/30/19 for this year's collection. So field 38 in your student template must contain a value of Y or E to submit a record for this collection. Otherwise, it'll flag a DQE error. And the costs that you're reporting for students, while they have to be eligible, they also have to be compliant. It has to be services that were provided under an IEP. There can only be one record submitted per LEA, per student, but since this is a full year report, it's possible, and in many cases likely, that the same student could be reported by multiple LEAs, even in different categories. Because if a student moves out of your district and into another district, or if a student comes to your district from somewhere else, they may show up in multiple districts' reports. It's okay for that to happen. The reporting categories for the collection have been updated. The PIMS Manual Volume 2 Appendix AJ is where the information can be found. The codes for the categories have not changed. Some language in the descriptions has to more closely align it with what is listed in the public school code. But the only thing that has really changed for purposes of reporting is the category has not changed, but the ranges have been updated by 1% based on the Consumer Price Index for December of 2018. This is a special ed collection. So special ed collections are not typical for PIMS reports. The district of residence is responsible for reporting every student for special education collections with the following exceptions. Charter schools are responsible to report the students enrolled in their charter schools. foster students, 13 non-resident foster students, are reported by the district in which that foster parent resides. Now, I know that this has been kind of a pain point for districts over the last year or so, because with some of the best interest determinations that are being made, you may not know that a student has been placed as a foster in your district. So you really have to see if you can find out whether a student's really a foster, because you would be responsible for reporting that kid. One exception to that is if it is a therapeutic foster, that's considered a 1306 placement, and then the responsibility would go back to the district of residence to report that student. Students who are placed in a state juvenile correctional institution, not a county prison, but a state facility, are typically for special ed collections reported by Corrections Ed, the Department of Corrections. They're not included in this report, but you shouldn't be reporting them because they're not. Wards of state are also not included in the report. However, if you had a student who was a non-resident foster with a unknown district of residence, they're technically a ward of state, but they're a foster before they're a ward, so you could include them as a non-resident foster. If a student is only a ward of state designated for a portion of the year, the district of residence or charter school or whoever else would otherwise be responsible for reporting can include that student with costs for the time when they were not a ward of the state. Additionally, this is not a report for gifted information. Even students who are gifted with a disability, it is not gifted costs. It's only special ed disability, so IDEA costs, not gifted. A couple things to note: if your district has a student who has been placed in an approved private school with 4010 approved funding, it may make sense, and I shouldn't have to say this, but you would only report the 40% costs that the district pays when reporting your Act 16 information. The Department of Education pays 60%, so that shouldn't be included, even though it's technically a cost of educating that student. It's extremely important that this information is submitted as accurately as possible, since the major reason is because it's used as a big part of the state special education subsidy payment. In addition, there's a possibility and a likelihood that the use of this data could be expanded in the future. I won't go into too much detail on that, but they're looking at using it more. So the PIMS template for this collection is a student fact template. It contains 7 fields, and most of them are pretty easy. There's really only 2 that you have to pay close attention to. The submitting AUN is your district's AUN, really simple. The school year date, even though it's a prior year collection, it's being reported in the 1920 school year. So this date should be 6/30/20 for this year's collection. The PA Secure ID is one of the fields that you really need to pay close attention to, and that's the ID of the student that you're reporting with the special ed costs. The reporting date is the date that is related to the year for which the information is being collected. So in this case, this is where you're indicating that it's 6/30/19 for the 18-19 school year. Fields 5 and 6, the collection and measure type, are 2 constant values of Act 16, which indicates the collection, and count, which indicates the type of information that you're providing. And then finally, field 7, the Act 16 fund category, is the code from Appendix AJ that is related to the category in which the student's costs fall. So again, there's only 2 real fields that you need to pay close attention to, that being the PA Secure ID to make sure that you have the right student for submission, and field 7, which is the fund category. Please note that all of the fields except for the fund category are key fields. So because the fund category is updatable, you don't need to submit a delete request if the category for the student would change for some reason. For example, if you forgot to include special ed transportation cost, and the inclusion of that cost would kick them into the next category, the next funding category. There may be a lot of effort that goes into preparing the data for this collection, but from a submission standpoint, it should be a fairly simple submission process, since there's not a whole lot of edit checks in the collection. Just basic file validation, making sure that you have the required fields populated, making sure that you have valid values and in the right format. Additionally, there's only one DQE check in place. In order to submit a student template fact record, you have to have a student template record in the warehouse, and that student template record has to have a Y or an E in the student template special ed indicator field 38. This could include students who are summer grads who attended ESY. So don't forget those kids. A good way to make sure that you're including a record for every student that you had as special ed in the previous year is to run a student template details and review field 38. Do note that the code in field 38E for exiting, you could have students who were not special ed in a year because that code is present for 2 years. So you do want to take a close look at those kids to make sure that it's the first year that they exited and not the second. You do want to review this data. PDE is looking specifically for LEAs that have differences in the cost categories that exceed 20%. So if you report 20% more or 20% less students in a particular category between years, you are probably going to be asked to provide justification for the reasoning in which you're reporting those students. So this is where I'm going to refer back to some of those school finance documents, where if you and your business office have a really clearly defined procedure for assigning costs, it should be very easy for you to provide this detail in the event that you are asked to do so. If the team of the staff working in the district in preparation of this data, the business office, the special ed team, don't have access to PIMS reports, there's a couple ways that they could get that information. I would encourage the PIMS people to share that with their special ed departments in their business office to make sure that you're capturing all of the students. But if not, you could take a look for the category 2, 3, and 3A on the legislative summary document that is available for, on the PDE Act 16 website. And you could look at the proposed funding for special ed, which would show your category 1 kids. I will note that for category 1, it may include your charter school kids, which is why I would really stress encouraging districts to share information from the Cognos reports with the people who are working on preparing this data for submission. With reviewing the Cognos reports in mind, there aren't really a whole lot for this submission right now. I know that PDE is working on one that will show the reported data between years to try to help identify those where you might have a 20% difference between years. I would advocate for a few more, like they have for some of the PVAS and assessment submissions, where you can run reports to see which students don't have a template submitted. So if you have students with a Y or E, it would give you a list of who hasn't been submitted with a student fact template. But again, it's recommended that you run and review these. The 3 that are here are the student fact template details, which is what you submitted, a summary, which I imagine would just give you a count of the number that you submitted, and a totals by category code set, which would break out that summary by categories 1, 2, 3, and 4. As an IU, I don't have access to see these reports because we don't submit, but that's what I imagine that they would show. One other report, as I mentioned before, run your student template details to make sure that you have your students with Y or E submitted. Also note that there are actually 2 folders in the special ed section for Act 16. One of them is for Act 16 for the 15-16 year and later, and one of them is for Act 16 for prior to 15-16. I don't believe costs for students reported in category 1 were included prior to 15-16. So that may be the reason for the difference if you're looking at those two versions of the report. The submission window for this collection is C1, which opens in just under 2 weeks, 2 weeks from yesterday, October 1st, and it will close at noon on October 29th. There is no correction window. This is a change from previous years. It's going to be open the entire time, but there will be no PDE review window. So it's really important that you submit it because there's not a correction window. Just like all of the other special ed collections, submission of this information is included in your determinations for timely and accurate data. So you really should get it in on time. It's a prior year collection, and it's related to financial data. I know the AFR data for the districts to submit is usually due around this time, so I would hope, and I would really hope that at this point, there's not really a whole lot of adjustments that are going to be made to the expenditures that are on the books. So you should have a pretty clear picture of what categories the students are going to fall in once you've identified what method you're going to use to allocate those costs. There should be plenty of time to submit this information in the collection window. Again, it's not a very difficult template. There's only 2 fields that you really need to pay attention to. And there shouldn't be any problems with getting your data in early because the only one that really matters is an updatable field. And with all the other submissions in the C1 window, if you wait until the last minute, you may get stuck in the queue and you may not have time to review reports before the collection closes so you can make corrections. And with that, I can take questions, but I will say that with PDE not being able to join us today, I will do my best to answer them, but I will refer anyone to the RA-ED-SEA SE Act 16 at pa.gov, which is how you can refer specific questions or more policy or what costs can we include related things to the department. So I will stop sharing and send it back to Greg.
Thank you very much, Barry. Very informative. We will pause for a minute or two to allow questions to go in, and then we'll pick it up from there. Hey, it looks like we have one question from IU3. Should we remove any Act 16 records for students with mobility code A or C who enrolled at some time but were never educated at our district?
So that's a pretty simple one that I think I can answer. If you didn't provide any education to the student, you wouldn't have any costs to report for them, so you wouldn't submit them in the first place. Act 16 is a expenditure report for students that your district educated. So you may have a student template record submitted for a student that has Y or E that was a no-show in the fall. That may have been a summer transfer or a summer dropout or whatever. If you didn't provide any education, though, you wouldn't have any costs to report. So no, you wouldn't include that student in your Act 16.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Greg.
Yes, yes.
This is Shane from IU15. We actually have Dan here. Currently wants to come in and just give a quick update here on that.
Sorry, Barry's not exactly right. So if you have a student who you don't educate in your district at all, but they're educated by the IU or another district or an APS, you still report them because those are still your cost. You're getting the bill, so you would report those students. Doesn't matter where they're being educated. That's it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I should have clarified. If you have no expenditures related to that student, you would include them. If you send them somewhere else to be educated, certainly you would. But if you have nothing to report in terms of costs for that student, you wouldn't include them.
Okay. It looks like that's all the questions we have right now. So we're going to go into a little video commercial for the Data Governance Award of Excellence. Hey, thank you very much. We are going to take a 15-minute break. We're running a little bit ahead of schedule here, so we're going to take a 15-minute break, and we'll be back about 5 after the hour, and proceed with the PIMS help desk to hear from Amber, and then we'll be hearing from Stacy after that with October 1. So I'll put a timer up here, and we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. We are now going to turn it over to CSIU to hear from Amber from the PIMS help desk. Are you ready, Amber, or do you need a minute or two?
I think I'm ready.
All right.
All right.
I see you.
Okay, let me try sharing. All right. So good morning, everybody. My name's Amber. I work with the PIMS help desk, so you've probably talked to me on the phone before. So I have been asked to give kind of an overview of the upcoming October collections. It's a very high level overview of just what we kind of see people struggle with, as well as just kind of letting you know what reports you should be looking at when you are working with your different collections. So we'll talk about the big upcoming collections, the October 7th Winter Keystone Pre-Code Internal Snapshot, which is kind of the first thing we're going to hit that's due in October, as well as the C1 October student, C1 October staff, the grad drop. And then we'll talk very briefly about the Title III non-public student, the C1 Special Ed Act 16. So Barry pretty much covered everything I was going to say as well. And then also the Seed 5 submissions, the ones that used to only be uploaded in October, but they did open them earlier this year, so they've been open for a few months. And then they are also due the end of October with all the C1 submissions. So the first thing I just wanted to mention are some resources that are available for you. Definitely make sure you have a copy of the data collection calendar downloaded. I believe we're on version 1.2 at this point. So if you haven't updated recently, you may want to check and just see if it is an updated version, something more so than what you currently have. The two main tabs I want to point out are obviously the calendar tab. That's going to list all of the collections, when the due dates are, as well as what templates are included in each of those collections. And I also just wanted to point out the internal snapshots are not listed chronologically with collections 1 through 5. So collections 1 through 5 are chronological, but then you have to scroll down to collection 6, and that's where all the C6 deadlines as well as the internal snapshots are. So you do want to be paying attention to those and not just going down line by line as you're reading the calendar. Also on the calendar, I think this was added last year, there is an ACS summary tab. This includes each collection that has an ACS. It identifies where you can find that, so the path in the PIMS reports application, as well as the name of the ACS and the due dates. So I'm not really getting into the ACSs in this presentation because you can look there and find where you need to get those ACSs at. And then down at the bottom, that's the path from the PDE website where you can go to download the calendar as well as the manuals. Some other resources on the website are the PIMS dataset webinars. So again, the path there from the PDE website under resources and trainings, there are webinars and presentations. And I will point out for the different collections what's out there. For example, I think the October student has been updated recently, so you can go and watch a YouTube video with information about the upcoming student collection. There are also a lot of how-to guides out there under the resources and trainings. A couple new ones have just been posted within this last week for assessment as well as course, I believe. But those how-to guides are where you're going to find the details about what they're looking for in the collections. The manuals are very technical. These are the templates. These are the fields. This is what you need to put. These are the valid values. But the how-to guides are where you're going to find really what kind of the bulk of it, what they're looking for, the students are looking for, how to report certain scenarios, things like that. Most of the how-to guides also list the reports you should be running for each data set. So make sure you're looking at those. Some of them have really good descriptions about what you should be using each report for as well. So definitely look at the how-to guides. There's a lot of great information out there. And then finally, the Excel reporting tools. Some of the smaller collections, there are now Excel reporting tools PDE creates you can use for some of the smaller ones in collection 1. So I'll point out which collections have an Excel tool if your software system doesn't create the file for you. And just some suggestions from us, especially for people if this is your first October. And Barry kind of mentioned this as well. Upload earlier rather than later. Do not wait until the last day. Don't wait until the last week of October to do your submission. Every year people do, and when there's 800 people uploading, the system pretty much halts to a standstill, unfortunately. So if you upload earlier in October, you won't have as much trouble with the system slowing down as well as reports being slow when you're trying to run them. If you haven't been in the sandbox today, everything for collection 1 is now open in the sandbox. So you can start testing your files now, working through any errors you're having. That way, when it opens on October 1 in production PIMS, you can upload and your errors will be taken care of and you're good to go. Now, I know students may come in between now and October 1st, but at least you'll have most of your errors looked at and corrected before the collection opens. So as I mentioned, slower system processing times, it takes longer for the batches to process, as well as running reports. And then also our phone lines get busier. As everyone's getting their errors, we get backlogged. October is our busiest month. I think we have twice as many phone calls in October than we have any other month during the year. So the earlier you start looking at your data, if you have questions, it'll be a lot easier to get through to us as well. And I also just wanted to point out to make sure you're running the ACSs after you upload. This gives you a time or a chance to review the data on the ACS while the collection is still open. If you wait until the ACS needs to be signed, which a lot of these are in November, the collection is already closed, so you're not able to make any changes if you find out there's something wrong on the ACS. So it's pretty good practice that once you upload and you get that green check in Batch Manager, the next day start looking at your reports, especially your ACS, to make sure everything looks correct. And then if there's anything that needs to be changed or updated, you still have time to do that. So like I said, the first deadline we're gonna hit in October is for the Winter Keystone Pre-Code submission. So this is an internal snapshot. So internal snapshots are when PDE looks at your student and school enrollment templates on a certain date and uses the enrollment records to determine which students are enrolled on that date. So it's going to use a student and school enrollment templates. They can be uploaded under either the C6 student updates, or if you're working on October, it will look at the data that's on the C1 October student collection that's been uploaded. And the data must be submitted by October 7th at noon. There's no corrections for the internal snapshots. So essentially what you want to do is make sure you have your student and school enrollment uploaded by October 7th. PDE will shut down PIMS for that afternoon, and they will look at the school enrollment and determine which students are active on the 7th, and then pull them for the Winter Keystone assessment. The other field that's going to play a big factor in this, in addition to school enrollment, is on the student template, the Keystone Winter Assessment, field 214. This needs to have either a Y for receive pre-code or an O for online testing in order for the students to be sent to DRC. And then what happens is once those students are in DRC, you can select them and identify which assessment they're taking, if it's literature, biology, or algebra. So the big thing on that is make sure your enrollment records are correct and make sure field 214 on the Keystone Winter Assessment is correct for those students. As I mentioned, the how-to guides, there is an assessment one out there. I highly recommend taking a look at it. It is a very detailed report. They did an awesome job with it. It breaks out the different assessment collections for Keystones, PSSAs. So you can go in there and read kind of the general information and then also get the specifics for the Winter Keystone. I also believe then the presentation will get posted on the PAS website for the Winter Keystone pre-code as well. Some reports to take a look at. So for internal snapshots, since the data gets pulled on a certain date and then you can't fix it afterward, there are what are called pre-snapshot reports. And these are reports you want to look at before, in this case, October 7th, because that's going to show you what's currently in the system and what PDE is going to pull based on what's in there right now. So there are some PSSA Keystone specific ones. If you go into Cognos Production, PSSA Keystone folder, and then there's a pre-snap folder. There are some reports in there you want to take a look at. There's also a more generic report in the Verify folder, going into validation reports and then pre-snapshot verification. And I like report number 3 because it's going to show you all the students enrolled on the selected date. And then you can use that report to check the Winter Keystone assessment indicator to make sure it's showing the yes or O correctly. And when you run these reports, you do want to make sure you're running them for the snapshot date. So in this case, it'll be for 10/7. And these slides are up on the website, so you can download them, and all the paths you're seeing will be there as well. And then just one new thing that isn't specific to Winter Keystone, but it is on the student template, so it does apply, is there were some new fields added to the template this year. Field 221, the access for ELL's assessment indicator, and then field 222, which is the ELA assessment exemption indicator. If you've been doing any uploads for PVAS, you may or may not have hit some issues with this. I know some software systems are just kind of getting those new fields added. These fields aren't necessarily uploaded or populated for each of your students. It's typically just going to be your EL students. However, your records need to account for these fields. So last year, the student template ended on field 217. This year it ends on 222. If your file still stops on last year's 217, you're going to get an error when you upload into PIMS. So you do want to make sure your files are accounting for the fields out to field 222. All right, so the big collection, the big beast for October is the C1 October student collection. So this collection is looking at the student snapshot and the school enrollment templates. This is not an internal snapshot. So like we were just talking for Winter Keystones, that pulls your student and school enrollment data to determine the snapshot. This is different. You actually have to upload a third file called student snapshot. Within the file, it will have a snapshot date of 2019-10/01. And this file should include all of your students that are enrolled with you on October 1st. And this is a very important collection. This template is used for your kind of official enrollment counts throughout the school year. So you definitely want to make sure you're getting those counts correct and the demographic fields correct for your students. In C1 October, you can also upload the program's fact template if that applies to any of your students. And then there is also a district snapshot template, which is where you report your kindergarten starting age. This is only for school districts and charters that have kindergarten programs, but it does get uploaded under the C1 October student collection as well. So the templates are due on October 29th at noon, and there is no correction period. So last year and in previous years, essentially the collection was open for 2 weeks. They shut it down for a week and a half, and then it reopened for 2 weeks. Rather than having that period where it shut down for a week, we're just doing all 4 weeks at once. So you do want to make sure you're uploading early, running your reports, and getting everything correct by October 29th, because that's when the collection ends. There's no correction period afterwards for the C1 this year. Again, some resources. There's a how-to guide out there that I believe was updated earlier this year. And as I mentioned, the webinar, it's a YouTube video, and then also the PowerPoint is out there for you to take a look at. And the paths are earlier in the presentation, so you can find those on those pages. Some of the primary reports you'll want to run for October students. So if you go into the production folder, you'll want to look in the enrollment reports subfolder. And there are a bunch of reports in there, but they are all looking at the October data in a different way. So please make sure you're running those. There's also a subfolder in there that has the ACS and some additional reports. You should check those out. In production, there's also a low income reports folder that has, again, some reports that summarize your low income information. And then within the child accounting reports folder is where you'll find the kindergarten starting age detail report to verify that data was correct. And then also in the verify folder, validation reports and template verification, there are template detail reports. Essentially for every report you upload into PIMS, you can go in there and find a template detail report that just shows you everything that's been uploaded successfully on your template. So you definitely want to take a look at your student snapshot template details, but you can also look at student, school enrollment, programs fact. Those are all found there as well. Just one report I kind of wanted to talk a little more specifically about is the duplicate students reported details with other LEA. And this is in the enrollment reports folder, and then the subfolder, which I believe is ACS and enrollment verification. So this report is looking at your October 1st student snapshot and then comparing it with every other October 1st student snapshot that's been uploaded into PIMS. And it's looking for duplicates, any students that are reported by 2 LEAs on their October 1st snapshot. Because typically students should only be enrolled in 1 LEA on October 1st. So you want to make sure you're running this report, and you want to run it periodically, because as other schools are uploading, this report may change if they uploaded your student. So if you upload on the 1st, run the report and it's clean, run it again on the 15th because I'm sure a bunch of schools have uploaded, and by that point there may be a student or two pop up. So then if somebody does come up on that report, you want to determine, was the student truly enrolled with you on October 1st? Did they maybe withdraw and you just didn't get the withdrawal record in on time? Or maybe the other school is reporting them incorrectly. They were at that school last year and they didn't withdraw them. So just take a look at those and review the students. If you find out somebody was uploaded who should not have been, just let us know and we'll get you a deletion set up to have that student removed. Now there are a few instances where duplicates are valid. For example, if you have students going to an occupational CTC, they'll be reporting the students as well as you on your, if you're a school district or a charter, potentially IU, you'll both be reporting. So those duplicates are correct. Also, school districts that have IU classrooms in their buildings, if students get mainstreamed into your school district classes, both the IU and the school district would be reporting because you're both educating. So just because a duplicate is there doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem, but you still want to review them and make sure it is legitimate. All right, so jumping into October staff. So the October staff, we report both professional and support staff. The staff snapshot and staff assignment templates are what we use to report professional staff. And then there is a super or support personnel district fact template. And I know some software systems do create that for you. There is also an Excel reporting tool. The support staff data is reported in aggregate. You're not reporting individual staff like we do with teachers and other professionals. So it is something you can put in the district fact with the aggregate counts. Again, these are due the end of October, October 29th at noon, and no correction period for this. Some resources, the staff how-to guide, there is a staff webinar out there. Also on the super Excel template, there's an instructions tab that gives some definitions and some detailed information there. So even if your software system creates that file, it still may be beneficial just to look through the instructions to see what the definitions are and what it's asking for. The staff reports can be found in the production folder and then the staff profile reports. There is an error report subfolder, and you do want to take a look at these reports in there. There's ones that look at staff who were uploaded last year as active or as non-terminated who are not in this year's snapshot, because anyone who was uploaded last year as non-terminated should be uploaded this year either as active or if they have terminated, uploaded with their termination information. There's a professional personnel edits report, which is a multiple page report that looks for different things that could go wrong with your data. For example, having multiple superintendents reported or something like that, or not having the superintendent reported. So you want to run those reports and look to see if you have any staff or anything showing up on those. And then years experience and years experience in district. It's a current year, prior year comparison. It's just looking for any anomalies in your years experience. It should typically increase one year each year. So if there's anything that decreases, stays the same, or jumps more than 1 year, it will come up on here for you to double check. There are certainly instances where if you found out something was reported incorrectly in prior years and you corrected it this year, that may show on that report, but as long as the current year data is accurate, that's what you're going for. The support personnel has its own folder in the production, so you can run that to verify the numbers. The ACS, though, is the staff ACS. It includes both the professional and the support counts. So at the very last page, you'll see a little chart that summarizes the support counts on it. So make sure you're checking those as well when you review the ACS. A couple of things that people always seem to have questions on, so I wanted to bring up. Fictitious staff with the IDs of all 9s for subcontractor and 8s for college professor. If your LEA is paying for the services, so like a contracted cyber program that is from a private company, you should be accounting for that fictitious staff in your 3 staffs templates, staff assignment, and staff snapshot. because it is something your district is paying for. So you would report the fictitious staff ID, and the salary would be the amount you're paying for those services. As well as the dual enrollment college professor, if your district is paying for the college classes for the students to go, you would report that. If it is something where the students and parents are paying, then in that case, you don't need to report them on the snapshot and the assignment. However, you will need to add them to the staff template at some point in order to report the courses later in the year. Also terminated staff. So while it is called a staff snapshot, we are not just looking at your staff who are active on October 1st. Anybody who has been terminated since last year's snapshot date needs to be reported on this year's snapshot to include the reason they exited as well as their exit date. So it is a little more than just a snapshot of who's active. And so the terminated staff will be on your staff template and the snapshot. They will not be on the assignment. The assignment is just for your active staff members. All right, so jumping into grad drop. So for the grad drop cohort, it gets looked at by PDE kind of two different ways. The first way is just looking at the 18-19 school year and how many graduates did you have and how many dropouts did you have. And this is regardless of grade 9 entry date. This is just kind of a summary of who graduated and dropped out last year. So those reports should be run. I believe that ECS is due in November. So you'll take a look at it, just who graduated and dropped out last year. Then additionally, we have the 3 graduation cohorts. So the cohorts are looking at a group of students who started 9th grade in the same year to see if they graduated in 4 years, 5 years, and 6 years. So when you're looking at your 4-year graduates, these are students who started 9th grade in the 15-16 school year, and their 4th year would be in the 18-19 school year. So these would be your students who graduated on time in 4 years. However, we're also looking at the 5-year cohort. So these are students who started 9th grade in the 14-15 school year, and so their 5th year was the 18-19 school year. So this cohort is hopefully going to be all of your graduates from when those students were in their 4th year, so 17-18, and then any additional students who graduated in their 5th year in the 18-19 school year. And then the same thing with the 6-year cohort. That's looking at students who started grade 9 entry date in the 13-14 school year, and then the 18-19 school year is their 6th year. So again, hoping to get some more graduates in the 4th and 5th year, or sorry, 5th and 6th year for those students. So the cohorts are looking at the student and school enrollment templates and for all years involved. So when you're looking at the 6th year, it's going all the way back to the 13-14 student template and up and looking at transfers, dropouts, anything that happens for that group of students in any of those 6 years. So depending on what you need to correct, you may have to go back a couple years if a transfer was missed or something like that. So again, for grad cohort, hopefully you have most of your graduates uploaded at this point because you can upload them during the summer as part of the C6 student updates that's been open. But it does then also open kind of one final time in C1 called grad drop, and it is due October 29th, again at noon, and no correction period for that. There is a grad drop cohort how-to guide out there, so you can take a look at that for more details about how the graduates and the cohort is working. Pretty much all the folder or reports are going to be found in production in the graduation and dropout reports folder. So the 18-19 graduates and dropouts, so not cohort, just looking at who graduated and dropped out last year. There's a subfolder in the graduation and dropout reports called dropouts, and a second folder called graduate non-cohort. So you'll want to take a look at those reports. It just essentially will summarize and look for any errors on your graduates and dropouts. There is a graduation status student detail verification. That's in the graduate non-cohort folder. And it actually summarizes everybody by their grad status for the 18-19 school year. So one tab lists all your graduates, the next tab lists all your dropouts, and the third tab lists any other grad statuses like your transfers or left PA public school. So that's just a good report to see the details of which students individually are making up the graduate and dropout counts. So now moving on to the cohort, still in the graduation and dropout reports folder, there is a cohort subfolder in there. And you'll see a group of reports, there's 5 reports, I believe. And these all need to be run 3 times. You need to run them for the 4-year, the 5-year, and the 6-year cohorts. And when you go to run them, you'll see the typical prompts for your LEA name and the school year. There's a third prompt where you put in if it's the 4-year, 5-year, or 6-year cohort. Right now, the best report to be looking at is the cohort list without attribution. And I do go into more detail in the next slide as to what that's looking at. In that folder, there's also frozen data PDE attribution for cohort graduation. There's a detail and a summary report. What that's going to do, I think usually mid-October, that report starts showing up once most people have uploaded their graduation information. PDE applies the attribution rules, so removing any students that get attributed to the state, or if students maybe get attributed to a different district if you're educating some non-resident students. These reports summarize how the attribution is going to look. And if you've done grad cohort, if this isn't your first year and you've been doing this for a while, you know the grad drop data for the cohorts then gets sent to DRC for attribution in early December. This report is just kind of summarizing what's going to go to DRC. So you can take a look and see if maybe something needs to be corrected on your end, or you can kind of look and see if which students you'll need to correct during the attribution process. And then the final bullet there, the frozen data final graduation detail and summary reports. These are the reports that show the final data after the DRC attribution in December. And these reports usually aren't updated until early January. So a little more about the cohort list. This report is looking at your LEA's data as it's currently in PIMS, so no attribution rules have been applied to it. It's just what you uploaded on your templates. And again, you want to run it 3 times for your 4, 5, and 6-year cohorts to get the students for the different grade 9 entry dates. This report also has multiple tabs. The LEA reported tab is going to be everyone who is ever in your district for that grade 9 entry date. It's going to include all the transfers, but it should show that they transferred out of the cohort. We'll show all the graduates, the dropouts, and any students that are still remaining in your cohort. There's a bunch of columns in there that indicate they started in the cohort, are they ending in the cohort, yes or no? Are they counting as a graduate or a non-graduate? So you can kind of filter on those and focus on potentially any non-graduating students to make sure those are accurate. There is an unaccounted for student tab. And if somebody's showing up on this tab, there's a problem with them. This is something where if they're showing up, there is an issue that needs to be resolved. This is looking at students that were uploaded typically in year 1, 2, or 3 of the cohort, and then they don't show up in year 4, and there's no grad status showing what happened to them. So a lot of times a transfer code just got missed, something along those lines, but there is something wrong because they're not reported in at least year 4, and there's nothing saying what happened to them. So you do want to look and figure out what happened with those students, and if they need to be transferred, or maybe they need to be added to year 4. Maybe somehow they got missed for a whole year. And then finally, there is a continued students tab, and this could potentially be correct. These are students who are in the final year of the cohort. So for the 4-year, the 4th year, 5-year, 5th year, and so on. And they don't have a grad status. So a lot of times these are your students who are going to be returning for a second senior year, or if they repeated 9th or 10th grade, they haven't quite reached 12th grade, so they'll be coming back for an additional year. But you just want to verify that these are truly students who, in this case, are students who ended the 18-19 school year and are going to be coming back for the 19-20 year. Some other reports, the non-cohort unaccounted for students is looking for unaccounted for students who aren't specific to a cohort. So this is just kind of cleaning up the 18-19 data, getting it ready for future cohorts. And then there is also a dropouts who re-enrolled report that you can use if you uploaded a student as a dropout with a WD01 or 09. It will then look to see if anybody else in the state reported them so that you can potentially contact them, see if they enrolled the student, and remove the dropout code on your data. There are also grade 9 entry date verification reports. And some of you may not have this slide. I added it yesterday afternoon. So I just wanted to specifically indicate the student grade 9 entry lookup is a report you can use. It's really good this time of year to see what the grade 9 entry date is for a new student you haven't uploaded. So I just wanted to point out these reports are there if you need to look in a little more detail at what the grade 9 entry date should be for a student. The slide should be updated to now include this on the DQN website. All right, and then just kind of briefly getting into the kind of the little collections in C1. There is a C1 Title III non-public student, and this is required for all school districts, regardless of whether or not you're Title III. And it's essentially giving counts of non-public students who are served, which may be 0. This is a very small template. It's 3 lines, it's looking for 3 counts. There is not an Excel tool for this, but it is very easy to create. If you go into volume 1 of the PIMS manual and also reference Appendix AF, there's a whole sample that shows you exactly what it would look like in Excel. And I think it's like 8 fields. So you just kind of want to mimic that, put your counts in, and then upload that. And then at the bottom, there's the path for where you can find the detail report to verify the data once it's been uploaded. Special Ed Act 16, hopefully you were here earlier and heard Barry's presentation. He pretty much covered everything I was going to mention here with the reports. The C5 Title I student, so this is one of the ones that opened earlier in the summer. It is for school districts, charters, and IUs that serve Title I students. There is an Excel reporting tool out on the PDE website that you can use to put in the counts for this. Where that Excel reporting tool is, there is a quick reference guide as well. It takes you to another page that gives a lot more detail about it. And then there is the path for the reports to verify the counts once they've been uploaded. The C5 athletic opportunities. This is for all schools with any of the grades 7 through 12. And this applies for school districts, charters, and comprehensive CTCs. And you do need 1 form per school. So if you have a middle school and a high school, and the middle school has 7 and 8, and the high school has 9 through 12, even if all the students do sports at the high school, you still need to report these for each of the schools that have those grade levels in. Or if you have 2 high schools and everyone's at the same high school, you still need to upload for both. There is a way to account for the students are not having the sports at the one school and commenting to look at the other school's data. But something does need to be uploaded for each school. Again, there is an Excel reporting tool, and below that on the Excel tool page is a link for more information about it. The Title III professional development is for LEAs who accepted Title III funds. And again, there's a reporting tool, and that is the path to where you can find the template reports to verify the data. And then I was gonna say, I think finally, the home ed and private tutoring. This is for all school districts. Again, there is a tool out there you can use. There's some information and I think a link on the first tab of the Excel tool to give you that information. And then the reports for that as well. So hopefully I didn't go too over. If you have any questions, but as always, especially if you have something specific, it may be better to just call the help desk than ask it in this forum. But certainly give us a call. We're there from 8 to 4 every day. You can also submit requests electronically, and if you download the PowerPoint slides, that is a link that takes you to the help request form. So that's it. I don't know how to stop sharing. Let's see what I need to do. Stop share, that would work. All right.
Thank you very much, Amber. That was great, and thank you for all that good information. We do have a few questions, so I will start sharing this, and we can start going over that if that's okay with you, and a few more questions will probably be coming in.
All right.
All right, so the first question, it comes from Bucks County. The Keystone pre-code PowerPoint that was sent yesterday by DDQ seemed to indicate the LEA has to identify the testing method, paper and pencil online, DRC. Is that not something that will be brought over to DRC based on the assessment participation code in fields 214 and 260?
So I only briefly looked at that presentation. I believe what happens is they send everyone who's identified as either paper or pencil or online, just in case the online doesn't go through. If something happens where you decide you do want a paper and pencil presentation or assessment for that, sorry, then those students are in DRC, so you could order labels if possible. That's my brief recollection from last year. However, I think that presentation was sent with a Q&A, so I would really suggest asking the assessment office about that, either sending them an email or asking in that Q&A for it.
Yeah. And if anybody needs to follow up with something, you feel free to talk to your POC at your location to unmute and jump in. We'll go ahead and go to the next question from Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit. For the staff, 9999, in the staff template, are all the contact fields needed? First, last name, date of birth, etc. If so, should we use the info of our cyber coordinator, or should it be something like cyber contractor and fictitious date of birth?
Yep, so you can essentially just use dummy information. A lot of people use, like you said, cyber contractor, subcontracted teacher, college professor for the eights. So yes, anything that's required in the staff template needs to be populated. You do want to fill that out with something valid. A lot of people use just your school's address. The one thing with birth date is it has to be something like over 20 years old in order for it to be accepted. So just put it like 1980, January 1st or something like that. But yes, all required fields need to be filled out with something for those staff.
Thank you. Capital Area Intermediate Unit. The PIMS report in the production enrollment area, location code of residence, should also be reviewed not only for October, but throughout the school year. Just a statement.
So, yep, I agree. Yeah, some of those reports I think are more general. They definitely apply for October, but some of them, especially if they don't have a snapshot date associated with them, you can run and use them throughout the year. Agreed.
All right. Next, we have from Montgomery Unit. Get the following error when attempting to upload a student template. Grade 9 entry range. DQE generated file. Okay, so I'm not going to read all of that, but they looked up a student in the public folders, eScholar Framework for Cognos production, the grade 9 entry lookup, Cognos report, and had the correct dates in their SIS, submitted a data exception request and is approved. However, this could affect many students. We're going to have to submit a data exception request every time we try to upload these students.
No, this is a once and done. So once you reviewed it and you verified that is correct for all of them. So typically these are students that repeated a year or skipped a year potentially, so they're not the normal range. It kicks back this error, but if you reviewed it and they're legitimate, request a data exception, and once they've been approved once, as long as you don't change it, the system will see it's already in there and it won't bring this error up again. So once you request it, it's done. And I believe even for like future school years, as long as you're repeating this or reporting the same date you reported last year, the system checks that and sees it's the same and will disregard it for the future years.
Thank you. Oops, down too far. From Midwestern Intermediate Unit, where is the Excel reporting tool for the Title III non-public submission located?
Yep, so that is the one that does not have an Excel reporting tool. If you do pull up that slide, it shows you where in the PIMS manual you can find a sample of it. Like I said, it's a really easy template. It's 3 lines with I think 8 fields, and all you're putting in there are your counts. So if you go to the district fact for EL section of the PIMS manual, it will show you all the template fields, and then right below that will be a sample of those 3 lines. So it's one you just want to make quickly in Excel.
Okay. All right. Next question is from Riverview Intermediate Unit. Is it required to submit the Title III non-pub as indicated in the presentation? Called the help desk, we're told we did not have to.
The Title III non-public, yes, is required for all school districts. The Title III professional development, that one is only required if you accepted Title III funds. So hopefully whoever you were talking with at the help desk is interpreting that as professional development. But yeah, Title III non-public, if you look in the manual, it says it is required for all school districts. I believe the calendar also emphasizes that. But Title III professional development is only for those who accepted Title III funds.
Thank you. Another one from Midwestern Intermediate Unit. We had a couple students that dropped out of our district at age 17 and have now shown up in a cyber school 2 years later as a reporting senior. Do we go back 2 years to correct the dropout designation? No, students only have until October 1st of the year following the year they dropped out. So if it's 2 years from now, the dropout is going to remain for them. Do report a staff member who is on an unpaid leave of absence until the 2nd semester due to their level 1 cert being expired. You do report any staff who are on leave. I don't believe there is any exception for like the leave of absence because of a cert being expired. I would double check the staff how-to guide just to make sure, but typically anyone who's on leaves does get reported. Riverview Intermediate Unit, our assessment coordinator states he does import directly into DRC for our winter pre-code labels and all pre-code labels for that matter. Can someone clarify why we're also asked to have this data ready for a pre-code internal snapshot? I do not understand the apparent duplication of effort. Again, this is probably something the assessment office can talk a little more to. Typically uploading directly to DRC, from my understanding, is that's sort of what you should do if you can't upload to PIMS, because you want to make sure the PIMS data matches what's going to show up on the pre-code labels, because that gets used for attribution later in the year. So if the file being uploaded to DRC has different names, spellings than what's in PIMS, that's going to cause a mismatch down the road. I don't know if there are any consequences of not doing that. That's definitely more an assessment question on that part of it. Thank you. I think that is all. So I'm going to stop sharing. Something comes up. I'm going to stop sharing and be turning it over to Stacy at Chester County Intermediate Unit.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, after the August meeting, The special ed department at PDE reached out to me for some corrections on some of the slides. So those corrections were sent out to all of the points of contacts at the IU, and hopefully they were shared with you. If not, I wanted to just take a few minutes to go over those changes so that way everybody's on the same page. So for the special ed collection, the gifted indicator for field 80 on the student template. So after talking with Dan as well as the gifted supervisor at PDE, it was determined that school districts should be updating the GS and the GY for all students enrolled in the LEA. Meaning if you have a student that is receiving gifted services through an IEP, you would want to change that field to GS. Previously, I believe the field would have been coded GN. And if they're receiving gifted services through a GIEP, it would stay the same. There's no change. The code is still GY. So you would just continue to mark those students as directed. The new code GX, which is students that have been determined eligible for gifted services but aren't receiving them, you only need to update those students moving forward, meaning LEAs do not need to go back and review all of the students enrolled in their district. So what I would do for these three codes is I would pull a student template from my SIS, I would pull it into Excel, and based on field 80, I would sort students that are labeled GY or GN, and then I would work with my special ed director to determine which code they should be using correctly. And then obviously if they're not gifted, then the N applies, there's no change from that in the manual. Sorry about that. So I would be working with my special ed director. I would also be working with the special ed vendor that you use to make sure that if you're pushing these codes over into your SIS, that they know how they should be pushed over appropriately to make that change. All right, and the second correction that I needed to make was the primary placement type. So this is a new field for the incident offender template. It's field 22. But it matches field 32 on the special education template, and it's a Y or an N field value. So I misunderstood how to use this field in general. So after talking with Dan, I have a better idea. So this is a student that's been placed into your school district by a non-educational agency. So for example, if you have a student that is residing in a group home in your district, or in a residential facility, foster home, you would want to be marking a Y in your special ed template for field 32. But then if they were involved in a safe schools incident, you would also need to mark a Y for field 22 on the incident offender template. And I'm hoping Dan is still at Harrisburg and can correct me if I was wrong in how I explained that.
That was correct. So you're good.
Okay, perfect. So if there's any questions or if you need further clarification, I'm happy to answer questions, or if you need Dan to explain something, I'm sure he'd be happy to explain. One of the things that I found out here recently over the last week is that for most of us who use PowerSchool, our fields have not been updated yet. So if you're looking to submit a student template in time for tomorrow's snapshot for PVAS, one of the things that I've done for the LEA that I'm reporting PIMS data is I went through and I just updated the fields manually, ran the student template from PowerSchool, pulled it into Excel. I filtered the gifted column, worked with the special ed director to fix those GYs, GSs, and GXs. And then I added on the additional columns that are new this year. Those columns aren't needed for the PVAS snapshot. They'll be needed later in the school year. So I just put all, I think I put N's in for the exclude, and I put, I think it was O for the type of the pre-code label needed for the WIDA access test. And then I uploaded that template, knowing full well that I'm going to have to go back and correct those last 2 columns. But this way the data is in there, so that way when PDE does the snapshot for tomorrow, the students are there. I don't know if that helps anyone. For some people, it might be a lot more work than it is for me. The particular building that I report for only has about 2,000 students, and it was fairly simple to do the corrections manually and then put them up into PIMS. And that's all I have for right now. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Stacy. I do want to say this is follow-up on the presentation Stacy did last month. You can go to the August folder and see the presentation there and get more information about changes and handling those with these corrections. I don't see any questions right now. We'll give it another minute for questions to come in. Okay, not seeing any questions. I won't we'll proceed. And I do want to thank Steve and Barry and Amber and Stacy for their presentations today. Thank you very much for sharing that information with us. Quick note, Steve's presentation has been updated on the DQN website, and he has also included a blank copy of the spreadsheet that he was referencing. That is posted up there, so you may reference that as well. On the screen, we have the feedback link, tinyurl.com, DQN, SAP, ranking feedback. That is also posted on, actually there's a typo there on the screen. It's supposed to be a T for September, SEPT. The correct link is on the agenda on the DQN website. So please provide feedback. We do review that and take that into consideration as we plan future meetings. Again, if you have any suggested topics or any suggestions for meetings, please contact your point of contact. And next month, we have getting ready for the December 1 special education child count. And also we're going to hear from the Penn State Data Center where special ed data is posted and how to use it. I'm looking forward to that. Presentation. So on behalf of all the POCs and Planning Committee, I thank you for attending. Please drive safely, and we look forward to seeing you again in October. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll turn you over now to local discussion.